The Sky Kingdom of Elthira did not forgive weakness. It never had. Suspended among the clouds like a crown of stone and flame, Elthira stood as the pinnacle of dragonkind's glory, a realm where towering spires pierced the heavens and bridges of white marble stretched across impossible distances, connecting floating islands that drifted lazily in the high winds. The air itself shimmered with magic, alive with the thunderous beat of wings and the distant roar of dragons. Here strength was not merely admired. It was worshipped. Dragons were not companions, they were living embodiments of power, chosen only by those whose bloodlines stretched back through centuries of conquest and command. Riders were not trained, they were born. And anything less was discarded. From the grand balcony overlooking the central arena, Lady Valera of House Tandor watched the world below with cold, measuring eyes. The arena was alive with movement. Noble houses had gathered in full splendor, silks shimmering in the sunlight, banners snapping in the wind, each crest proclaiming lineage, victory, and dominance. Beneath them, the chosen riders prepared for the trial of ascent, their dragons restless and magnificent. Elthira's pride was on full display. Golden-scaled titans shifted their weight like mountains breathing. Crimson worms exhaled curling tendrils of smoke, their eyes glowing like embers. Sleek sapphire drakes flexed vast wings that glimmered like shards of the sky itself. Perfection. Every scale, every movement, every roar spoke of absolute supremacy. Valera expected nothing less. She stood at the forefront of the balcony, her silver-white armor gleaming as though forged from moonlight itself. The sigil of House Tandor, a winged blade, was etched across her breastplate, its edges catching the light with every subtle movement. Behind her, nobles murmured in anticipation. But Valera was not listening. Her gaze had settled on something wrong. At the far edge of the arena, apart from the polished ranks of noble riders, stood an anomaly. A disruption. A stain. At first glance, it almost went unnoticed, overshadowed by the sheer presence of the dragons surrounding it. But once seen, it was impossible to ignore. A humans. That alone was enough to draw attention. Humans were not unheard of in Elthira, but they did not belong in the arena. They were artisans, laborers, scribes, useful in their place but never among riders, never among dragons of war. And yet there she stood. Young, slight, dressed not in armor or silks but in worn leathers stained with oil and soot. Her dark hair was tied back haphazardly, strands falling loose around her face streaked with grease. Her hands, Valera noticed with faint distaste, were calloused, marked by work rather than training. Not a rider's. A worker. A mechanic. And beside her, Valera's lip curled ever so slightly, stood a dragon that did not belong. It was smaller than the others, not by much but enough to matter. Its body bore the marks of survival rather than breeding. Scars crossed its flanks, its scales dulled and uneven, lacking the luminous sheen of a noble dragon. But it was the wings that drew the eye. Or rather, what remained of them. One wing hung slightly lower than the other, its structure warped, the membrane thinner, uneven. The other bore visible signs of repair, reinforced joints, metal supports embedded along the bone, straps securing unnatural extensions. It was wrong. Artificial. A mockery. A crippled beast. Valera's voice cut softly through the murmuring crowd behind her, precise and sharp as a blade. A nearby noble leaned forward, following her gaze, then another. Soon, a quiet ripple of attention spread across the balcony. Recognition came swiftly. And with it, laughter. And her rider is a human, one of the nobles said, amusement lacing every word. What has Elthira come to? They send mechanics now, not riders. A few chuckles followed, restrained but unmistakable. Valera did not laugh. She did not need to. Her disdain was quieter, colder. More absolute. Below, the human girl knelt beside her dragon, seemingly oblivious to the attention gathering above. She worked with steady hands, tightening straps along the dragon's wings, strange constructs of leather and steel, interlocked with small, intricate mechanisms that caught the sunlight in dull glints. Not magic. Not natural. Built. Valera's eyes narrowed slightly. The girl spoke softly, too low to hear from the balcony, her expression focused, not nervous, not ashamed. Calm. That more than anything irritated Valera. She should have felt out of place. She should have known she did not belong. But instead, she simply worked. What is her name? Valera asked, not turning. A servant stepped forward quickly, bowing his head. Lyra, my lady, no house, registered as support personnel. Support, Valera repeated, the word tasting faintly bitter. Her gaze shifted again to the dragon. And that? The servant hesitated. Ember, my ladies. Valera hummed softly, unimpressed. Names did not grant worths. Blood did. And that creature had nuns. Below, Lyra finished tightening a strap and leaned back slightly, examining her work. Sweat clung faintly to her brow, streaked with grease, but her expression held quiet satisfaction. The dragon lowered its head toward her, amber eyes gleaming, not with ferocity, but with something far more unsettling. Trust. They will laugh, the dragon rumbled. The sound did not reach the balcony, but its meaning was clear in the way Lyra's shoulders relaxed, in the small curve of her lips. They already are, she replied. Valera watched the exchange, her expression unreadable. There was something unusual there. Not dominance. Not command. Something else. The dragon spoke again, its tone softer, almost hesitant. Does it trouble you? Lyra paused, considering. Then she shook her head. No, she said simply, because they think dragons only have one way to fly. Valera's gaze sharpened. Arrogance. From that, the audacity was almost impressive. Almost. A sudden roar split the air, drawing all attention upward. Asterix. Valera turned as her dragon descended from above, wings outstretched like a storm-given form. Sunlight danced across her silver scales, each one flawless, each movement precise and powerful. She landed gracefully upon the arena floor, her claws barely disturbing the stone. Perfection. The crowd erupted into cheers. This was what a dragon was meant to be. Valera descended the steps with measured grace, her armor catching the light with every step. As she approached, Astrix lowered her head slightly, a gesture of respect reserved for no one else. Valera placed a hand against her dragon's scales, feeling the strength beneath them, the quiet, coiled power waiting to be unleashed. Ready? She asked softly. Astrix's eyes gleamed. Always. With practiced ease, Valera mounted, settling into place as though she had been born there. Because she had. Her gaze flicked once more across the arena. And found them again. The humans. The broken dragons. Still standing apart. Still unbothered. Valera tilted her head slightly, studying them with renewed interest. Let them try, she said, her voice low but carrying. The skis will teach them their place. Asterix shifted, her wings flexing in anticipation. Above them, the wind howled. The trial was about to begin. Across the arena, Lyra stood and wiped her hands against her trousers, leaving faint streaks of grease behind. She stepped back, looking up at Ember, not with awe, not with fear, but with certainty. One last check. One final adjustment. She reached up, tightening a small bolt along the mechanical brace, ensuring it held firm. The metal clicked softly into place. Secure. Reliable. Learned. Ember watched her, his massive form still patient. You are certain, he asked. Lyra smiled faintly. Not even a little. The dragon blinked, then let out a low rumble that might have been amusement. Good, he said. Because neither am I. Lyra huffed a quiet laugh, stepping back. Around them, dragons shifted, wings spreading, riders mounting. The air grew heavy with anticipation, charged with power and expectation. They did not belong here. Everyone knew it. Everyone believed it. Lyra reached out, placing her hand against Ember's side. Warm, steady, real. Ready? She asked. Ember exhaled slowly, smoke curling faintly from his nostrils. Always. The call echoed across the arena. Contestants prepare. Wind surged. Wings spread. The sky itself seemed to hold its breath. Lyra glanced once more at the towering dragons surrounding them, perfect, powerful, unquestioned. Then she looked back at Ember. Scarred, rebuilt, unbroken. Her grip tightened slightly. Not on reins. Unresolved. She stepped forward, resting her forehead briefly against his scales. Let's show them, she whispered. Ember's eyes glowed faintly. Yes, he said. Let us. High above, Valera watched them one final time. Still, waiting, not even attempting to take flight. Her lips curved slightly. Pathetic. The signal would sound soon. And when it did, they would fail. They had to. Because Elthera did not change. It did not bend. It did not accept weakness. The skis belonged to the strong. And the strong were born. Below, Lyra tightened one final bolt. The metal clicked into place with quiet certainty. She stepped back, exhaling slowly. Then, she smiled. Or maybe she whispered, her voice barely audible beneath the rising wind. "We'll teach the skies something new." The trial was simple. That was what they told themselves. That was what Elthera had always believed. Fly, not survive. Not endure. Not adapt. Fly. To the nobles of the Sky Kingdom, flight was not a skill, it was a birthright. Something etched into bone and blood, inherited through generations of riders who had never questioned their place among the clouds. The trial of ascent was not designed to teach. It was designed to prove. And it proved one thing above all else. Only the worthy belonged in the sky. High above the floating arena, the course stretched like a path carved through the heavens themselves. Massive stone pillars hovered at impossible heights, remnants of ancient magic that held Elthera aloft. Between them raged currents of wild wind, unpredictable, violent, ever-shifting. Storm clouds gathered along the course, crackling with distant lightning. Rings of controlled fire burned in midair, suspended by ancient enchantments, their flames dancing in the high-altitude gusts. It was not merely a race. It was a gauntlet. Grace was required to weave through the narrow spaces between pillars. Power was needed to push against the crushing winds. Instinct, pure, unrefined instinct, guided every movement. Or at least, that was how it had always been. Below, on the polished stone of the arena floor, Lyra stood beside Ember. And she had none of those things. No noble blood. No ancient training. No natural ability to command the sky. Around her, dragons shifted with restless energy. Massive wings unfurled, stretching wide as sails, casting long shadows across the ground. The air trembled with their anticipation, with the low growls and sharp cries that echoed between the stone walls. Riders mounted, their movements practiced, effortless. They belonged here. Lyra did not. She felt the difference in every glance thrown her way, in every whisper that rippled through the gathered crowd. The nobles did not hide their disdain now. There was no need. The trial would begin soon. And when it did, she would fall. That was what they believed. That was what they expected. Lyra let out a slow breath, steadying herself. Beside her, Ember stood motionless. Not tense. Not afraid. Still, waiting. He could feel it too, the weight of expectation, the silent judgment pressing down from above. The way the other dragons shifted away from him, instinctively distancing themselves from what they did not understand. From what they did not accept. His wings flexed slightly, the mechanical braces glinting faintly in the light. The metal extensions lay folded against his natural structure, silent for now. Dormant. Waiting. Lyra reached out, placing her hand against his neck. Warm. Familiar. Real. Ready, she asked quietly. Ember exhaled, a thin stream of smoke curling from his nostrils. His voice, when it came, was low and steady. Always. Above them, the signal horns began to sound. A deep, resonant note rolled across the arena, silencing the last of the murmurs. All eyes turned upward, toward the highest spire where the judges stood. A single banner unfurled. White. The mark of beginnings. Contestants, the voice echoed, amplified by magic, carrying across the vast expanse of stone and sky. Take to the skies. The world erupted. Dragons launched themselves into the air in a thunderous surge of power. Wings beat against the air with explosive force, sending gusts of wind tearing across the arena floor. Claws scraped against stone, muscles coiled and released. And then they were airbornes. Magnificent. Terrifying. Alive. Valera and Astrix rose among them, cutting through the chaos with effortless precision. Astrix's wings spread wide, catching the wind as though it welcomed her, as though the sky itself bent to her will. They ascended like a blade drawn through silk, smooth, flawless, unstoppable. Valera leaned forward slightly, her posture perfect, her control absolute. This was where she belonged. This was what she had been born for. Below, the arena shrank, the world becoming distant and insignificant. The wind rushed past her, sharp and cold, carrying the familiar thrill of speed and height. She allowed herself a small smile. Victory would be effortless. It always was. Her gaze flicked downward almost idly. And found them. Still on the ground. Still unmoving. The human and her broken dragons. Valera's smile sharpened. Of course, they could not even begin. Pathetic. On the arena floor, Ember had not moved. He stood at the edge of the launch platform, his claws resting against the smooth stone, his gaze fixed upward as the others disappeared into the sky. The wind from their ascent washed over him, tugging at his wings, rattling the metal braces that lay dormant against his sides. He did not react. He did not flinch. He waited. Beside him, Lyra remained still. Not rushing. Not panicking. Waiting. The laughter came quickly. At first it was scattered, small, uncertain chuckles from the stands. Then louder. Bolder. They're not even trying. Is it broken? Perhaps it forgot how to be a dragon. The words fell like stones, sharp and relentless. Lyra heard them. Of course she did. But she did not look up. She did not respond. Instead, she focused on Ember. On the steady rhythm of his breathing. On the familiar presence beneath her hand. Ready? She asked again, softer this time. Ember's eyes flicked down to her. There was no fear there. Only trust. Always. Lyra nodded. Then, she reached for the lever. It was small, almost insignificant, set into the harness just behind Ember's neck. A simple piece of metal, worn smooth from use. Unremarkable. Until it was. She pulled. A sharp hiss cut through the noise of the arena. Not loud, but distinct. Enough to draw attention. The laughter faltered. Heads turned. From the mechanical braces along Ember's wings, something shifted. Panels unfolded with precise, deliberate motion, thin metal segments sliding outward, locking into place with a series of sharp, clean clicks. They extended beyond the natural span of his wings, forming a lattice of steel and reinforced membrane. Artificial feathers. Engineered flights. Soft light flickered along the joints, a faint glow building within the mechanisms, pulsing like a heartbeat. Energy. Stored. Waiting. The arena fell silent. Confusion rippled through the crowd, replacing amusement with something far more uncertain. What is that? Someone whispered. Above, Valera slowed slightly, her brow furrowing as she looked down again. For the first time, she hesitated. Now, Lyra said. Ember moved, but not as they expected. He did not spread his wings. He did not leap into the air. He ran. His claws struck the stone with explosive force, each step sending sparks skittering across the platform. His body surged forward, powerful and grounded, muscles coiling and releasing in rapid succession. Not lifting. Charging. The edge of the platform rushed toward him. The drop beyond it yawned open, an endless expanse of sky and distance. He did not slow. He did not falter. And then, he jumped. For a single fragile heartbeat. Nothing happened. He fell. Gravity took hold, pulling him downward, dragging him away from the platform, from the sky, from everything Elthira believed in. A collective breath caught in the arena. Vindication flickered in Valera's eyes. Of course, this was inevitable. This was. The world exploded. A thunderous blast erupted from beneath Ember's wings, shattering the silence with raw, violent force. Light flared, bright and blinding, as the mechanisms along his wings ignited. Not magic. Not wind. Force. Pure controlled mechanical power. The air itself seemed to recoil as Ember was hurled upward, his descent violently reversed. The artificial wings snapped open fully, catching the rushing air, stabilizing his trajectory as the propulsion drove him higher. Vaster. Stronger. Unstoppable. Gasps tore through the arena. What? He's not flying. He's launching. Ember shot into the sky like a comet, a trail of heat and light following in his wake. The mechanical braces hummed with energy, adjusting constantly, compensating for every shift in wind, every imbalance in his natural wings. Below, the arena vanished. Above, the course awaited. Lyra leaned low against Ember's back, her hands moving swiftly across the control rig embedded within the harness. Levers, dials, and pressure points responded to her touch, each adjustment translating into subtle shifts in the mechanisms. She did not command. She guided. Together, they became something new. They did not glide like the others. They did not dance with the wind. They cut through it. Direct, relentless, precise. Through the first set of pillars, Ember surged forward, his path straight and unwavering. Where other dragons curved and banked, adjusting to the air currents, he drove through them, the mechanical wings compensating instantly, stabilizing his movement with unnatural precision. Speed built rapidly. Too rapidly. Ahead, riders began to notice. To react. A streak of fire and steel tearing through the sky. Valera saw it coming. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. It did not fit. It did not align with anything she had ever known. Dragons did not move like that. They did not accelerate in bursts. They did not ignore the wind. They did not. The streak closed the distance. Vast. Too fast. Valera's eyes widened. Impossible. Ember surged past her in a flash of heat and metal, the force of his passage rattling Astrix's wings. For a brief moment, Valera caught a glimpse of Lyra, focused, calm, utterly unshaken. Control. Absolute control. That's not flying, Valera snapped, her voice sharp with disbelief. Lyra's reply came without hesitation, carried on the wind as she pulled ahead. No, she said. It's something better. The words struck harder than any blow. Valera's grip tightened. Anger flared. Pride burned. Astrix roared, surging forward in response, her wings beating harder, faster, pushing against the air with renewed force. They would not be surpassed. They could not be. The course narrowed ahead, storm clouds thickening, lightning flickering between the pillars. The wind became erratic, shifting violently, threatening to tear lesser dragons from the sky. Riders struggled. Even the strongest faltered, forced to adjust, to fight for stability. But Ember did not slow. The mechanical wings shifted continuously, responding faster than instinct ever could. Micro-adjustments rippled across the structure, compensating for turbulence before it could take hold. Where others reacted, Lyra anticipated. Her hands moved constantly, reading the sky not as an opponent but as a system. Patterns, forces, variables. Problems to be solved. They cut through the storm. Unhindered. Untouched. Through the rings of fire, Ember surged without hesitation, the heat washing over his reinforced scales, the mechanical components shielding the weakest points of his wings. Through the final stretch, where the pillars rose in tight succession, leaving little room for error, they did not weave. They drove forward. Straight. Unyielding. Behind them, the others struggled to keep pace. Valera pushed Astrix to her limits, the silver dragon roaring as she surged through the final obstacles, her power undeniable, her speed unmatched. By anything she had ever faced before. But not this. Never this. The final pillar loomed ahead. The finish. The end. Ember crossed it first. There was no flourish. No dramatic arc. No elegant landings. Just pure, undeniable victory. Silence fell. Heavy. Absolute. The arena held its breaths. And then, it erupted. Not with laughter. Not with mockeries. But with something far louder. Shock. Disbelief. Because for the first time in Elthira's long, unbroken history, something that should not have flown had claimed the sky. Valera did not accept defeat. She refused to. The sky still roared around her, the echoes of the race lingering in the wind as dragons circled overhead, their massive wings carving slow arcs through the thinning clouds. The trial of ascent was over. It should have ended in triumph, in validation, in the reaffirmation of everything Elthira believed itself to be. Instead, it ended in silence, a silence that pressed against Valera's thoughts like an unwelcome truth she could not yet name. Asterix descended in a controlled glide, her wings beating in powerful, measured strokes. Even now, even after the race, her movements were flawless, each motion precise, each adjustment instinctive. Perfection, unquestioned, unmatched, or at least, it had been. Valera's jaw tightened as the arena rose to meet them, the white stone platform coming into sharp focus below. She could already see them standing there. The humans, the broken dragons, waiting, not celebrating, not boasting, just standing, as if they belonged. The thought burned. Asterix landed with a resounding impact, claws striking stone with a deep, echoing crack. The force of it sent a ripple through the platform, a subtle reminder of her strength, her dominance. Her rightful place. Valera dismounted in a fluid motion, her boots touching the ground with practiced grace. The crowd's noise washed over her, loud, chaotic, uncertain. Not the cheers she expected. Not the reverence she deserved. Whispers, confusion, doubt. She ignored it. She stepped forward, and with every step her resolve hardened. This was wrong. What had happened in the sky, it was wrong. It defied everything Elthira stood for. Everything she had been taught. Everything she was. A trick. Her voice cut across the arena, sharp and commanding, silencing the nearest murmurs. All eyes turned. Machines cheats. She stopped a short distance from Lyra and Ember, her gaze cold and unwavering. That is not the way of dragons. The words fell like a judgment. Not merely an accusation, but a declaration of truth. The truth Valera had always known. The truth she refused to abandon. Lyra slid down from Ember's back, landing lightly on the stone. Her movements were slower now, the strain of the race evident in the slight stiffness of her posture, in the faint tremor of her hands. She was tired, but she was not shaken. She met Valera's gaze without hesitation, without deference, without fear. It's the way that works, she said simply. The calmness in her voice only sharpened Valera's anger. Works, Valera repeated, her tone tightening. You mistake success for legitimacy. She gestured sharply toward Ember, toward the mechanical braces that still hummed faintly with residual energy. Dragons are born to fly, it is their nature, their purpose. Her gaze hardened. Yours is flawed. A pause, then colder. Broken. The word lingered. Heavy. Final. It struck like a blade. For a moment Ember lowered his head slightly, not in submission but in something quieter, something older. A memory of rejection, of abandonment, of being cast aside before he had ever been given the chance to prove otherwise. The arena held its breaths. And then, Lyra stepped forward. He is not broken. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried, clear, steady, unyielding. The murmurs faded, drawn into silence by the certainty in her tone. Valera's eyes narrowed slightly. He survived, Lyra continued. There was no anger in her voice. No bitterness. Only truth. He was injured as a hatchling, she said, her gaze unwavering, left behind because he couldn't fly. The words settled over the arena, uncomfortable and undeniable. Your kind called him useless. A ripple of unease passed through the gathered nobles. Valera did not look away. But something in her expression shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible. Lyra did not stop. But he learned, she said, her voice gaining strength. He learned to run when others flew. Her hand brushed lightly against Ember's side, grounding herself in his presence. To fight when others soared above the battlefield. Ember lifted his head slightly, his amber eyes glowing faintly as he watched her. To endure, she finished, when others would have given up. Silence deepened. Not the silence of dismissal, but the silence of listening. And I learned, Lyra said, her voice softer now but no less certain, how to help him do what everyone else said he never could. She turned slightly, gesturing toward the mechanical wings, the metal braces, the intricate mechanisms, the artificial extensions that still gleamed faintly in the light. This isn't a cheat. Her hand tightened slightly. It's trust. The word hung in the air. It's effort. Another step forward. It's refusing to accept that someone's worth is decided at birth. The arena stood still. Even the wind seemed to quiet, as if the sky itself were listening. Valera's gaze flickered. Just for a moment. She looked at Astrix. Her dragon stood tall behind her, her silver scales gleaming, her wings folded neatly against her sides. Perfect in every way. Unscarred. Unquestioned. Everything Elthira valued. Everything Valera had been taught to value. Then, her gaze shifted. To Ember. Scarred. Altered. Reinforced with metal and willpower. Standing not with elegance, but with defiance. The difference was undeniable. And yet, the memory of the race lingered. Of the moment Ember had surged past her. Of the impossible speed. Of the undeniable truths. He had flown, not as dragons were meant to, but as he needed to, further than any of them. Higher, vaster, unstoppable. Valera's chest tightened. Something inside her shifted, something old and rigid, something she had never questioned before. Cracking, she had been taught that strength was purity. That perfection was proof. That anything less was failure. But what she had seen, what she could not deny, did not fit within those beliefs. And for the first time in her life, Valera did not know how to reconcile the two. Her gaze dropped briefly to her hands, to the unmarked armors, to the life she had been given. Not earned, given. She looked up again. That Lyra, that Ember, at the undeniable truth standing before her. And slowly, painfully, she exhaled. The words that followed were quiet, measured, difficult. She began, then stopped. The arena waited. Valera closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. Clear, honest, I misjudged you. The admission felt heavy, unfamiliar, as though she were stepping into something unknown. Her gaze shifted to Ember, then back to Lyra. Both of you. The silence that followed was different. Not shocked, not uncertain, respectful. Lyra blinked once, then let out a small breath, her shoulders relaxing slightly. Most people do, she said, her tone light, almost casual. There was no bitterness there. No triumph. Just acceptance. Valera almost smiled. Almost. Behind her, Astrix moved. The massive dragon stepped forward, her presence commanding attention even in stillness. Her claws struck the stone softly, her head lowering as she approached. The movement was deliberate. Intentional. Valera did not stop her. She did not need to. Astrix came to stand before Ember. For a moment, the two dragons simply regarded one another. Silver and scarred. Perfection and persistence. Then, Astrix lowered her head. Not in dominance, not in challenge, but in acknowledgement. A dragon's respect. A gesture older than any noble house. Older than Elthira itself. The arena fell silent once more. Because this meant something. Ember did not hesitate. He lifted his head, meeting Astrix's gaze without fear, without doubt. Equal, not by birth, but by proof. The moment lingered, then passed. Above them, the skies of Elthira stretched endless and free, the clouds parting as sunlight broke through, illuminating the arena in soft golden light. For the first time, Valera truly looked at them. Not as anomalies, not as outsiders, but as something else. Something new. Something necessary. She had spent her life believing that strength was perfection. That anything less was weakness. That the world was divided cleanly between those who belonged. and those who did not. But the sky had shown her something different, something undeniable. Strength was not perfection. It was persistence. It was adaptation. It was the refusal to accept limits imposed by others. Her gaze lingered on Ember's wings, the blend of flesh and steel, of damage and design. Not a flaw, a solution. And Lyra's, not a writer by births, but something else entirely. A builder, a thinker, a force of change. Valera straightened slightly, her posture shifting, not with arrogance but with understanding. Elthira had remained unchanged for centuries. Unchallenged, unquestioned. But now, that had changed. And change, she realized, was not weakness. It was survival. The wind rose again, sweeping across the arena, carrying with it the distant cries of dragons circling above. The sky was still theirs. But it was no longer the same sky. Valera turned slightly, looking out over the vast expanse beyond the floating pillars. Endless, unbounded, waiting. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider a truth she had never been taught. The sky did not belong to those who were born to it. It belonged to those who could reach it. And sometimes, the ones who could not fly were the ones who changed the skies forever.